If I say Harry Potter or Percy Jackson is for kids, nobody panics, because it's all according to the fans. But if I say Star Wars is for kids, well, then everyone loses their minds.
It's just gonna be another goofy episode filled with silly jokes for kids.
This is Hot Take Tuesday. I can see the edits now. What is it? Star Wars is for kids. In fact, I've already seen the edits.
It's a film for 12-year-olds.
Yes, of course. Let's assume that George Lucas, the man, the myth, the dude that said, "All I need is an idea," is talking about the entirety of Star Wars as a brand and not the first, quote, film.
No, it's a film for 12-year-olds. When I did Star Wars, I had...
What are you talking about, George? You're still working on Star Wars.
The creator is talking about the first movie, so please stop, because that was and still is the actual name of the movie. This wasn't called A New Hope. Even the special edition labels episode 4 as simply Star Wars. Like, come on! But I'm digressing. Imagine if we changed the franchise and the audience. Imagine if I were to make the obvious observation that 20th Century Fox's Deadpool is a comedy.
People react to news of late-stage cancer differently. There are certainly options we can look into.
The worst part about cancer isn't what it does to you, but what it does to the people you love.
It's just as stupid. But I know, that's not going to convince you. After all, Star Wars fans are particularly good at 4 things. Fear, anger, hate, and suffering, especially when someone who's been behind the creative curtain tells off the said fans for their petty complaints about the kids show having the tone of a kids show.
Look, dog, you're just mad the franchise isn't aging with you.
Right.
But that ain't how it works. The first one was for kids.
Right.
Yep.
But again, you, assuming you are the fan in question, would probably say, it's not just for kids, Star Wars is for everyone. And I would agree. So is Disneyland, right? You can go as an adult all you want, but is not Disneyland deliberately designed with children in mind? Not necessarily.
Liar!
Here's the problem, you older younglings. If I am to proclaim this statement, it might imply that I believe tax-paying people should not be engaging with this media or any other kind of kid-centric thing. As if I believe some kind of social ban should be in place, that after the age of 13 or so, one must stop enjoying whatever given thing they enjoy, and if I can get another word in, no. I am not saying any of this. If you like a thing, like the thing. We all have our reasons, our feelings, our attachments to certain characters and stories, and as a storyteller myself, it would be uber counterintuitive for me to say it's wrong to hold on to those childhood treasures. I am not coming on here to say that Star Wars is for kids, and if you are not a kid, then you're wrong for currently being in a phase of liking it. You know why? In part because I'm currently in a phase of liking it, and I'm 27. To be clear, I am not here to shame anybody, not even Acolyte fans, assuming they exist. I just decided one day to pull out the VHS collection of the special editions and went to my wife with, why not? It's something to do in the 3rd trimester. So we watched the first one, altered Han scenes and all, and I thought, yeah, it's okay. Then we saw Empire, and I was like, holy shit, this is amazing! It's grounded, it's cool! It's the movie that made the Force tangible, the movie that gave us the Imperial March, and the movie that actually made Darth Vader the villain we all think of him today. Ruthless, committed, victorious. The vast majority of why Star Wars is awesome comes directly from this one film. Then we saw Return of the Jedi and thought it was pretty good. After Star Wars, my wife and I chose another trilogy to watch while we wait for baby, and we settled on The Lord of the Rings. After watching those movies, the Oscar-winning, epically battled, and heroically charactered perfection that is The Lord of the Rings, I remember peeping back at the Star Wars VHSs and going, oh yeah, that's totally for kids. And that's not a problem, or even a weakness in Star Wars quality. In fact, I'm here to argue that being kids intended, not to be confused with kid-friendly, is its greatest strength. You can't write off the entirety of Finding Nemo, for example, just for having momentarily scary scenes. Having dark themes or brutal implications in a kid's film doesn't take away from that film its intended target audience. Doesn't matter if there's smoky skeletons on the doormat. Star Wars is still for kids. How do I know Star Wars is for kids? Well, George Lucas said so. Next point. Why is that a good... Just kidding, that'd be too easy. If there's one word that aptly describes Star Wars and what it always ought to be, it's simply this: simplicity. Simplicity is the sole reason Star Wars succeeded.
I think one of the key factors in the success is that it's a positive film. It has heroes and villains, that it essentially is a fun movie to watch. It's been a long time since people have been able to go to the movies and see a sort of straightforward, wholesome, fun adventure.
From the underdog rebels whose faces we identify with, contrasting with the uniformed soldiers who wipe them out, to finally seeing a tall, dark, and masked individual with a spooky breathing pattern, the whole setup is immediately identifiable and understandable. Oh, that's the bad guy.
And I said, George, why aren't you cutting away to two characters saying, oh, that's the Dark Lord of the Sith, he's the most powerful evil. He goes, no, well, he's got a white background, he comes on in a black costume, we'll play some scary music, they'll get it. I thought, wow, what economical storytelling.
This simplicity sticks around to drive the whole movie forward, and it doesn't grow limbs. There are no diverting events, no two stories that split for us to focus on. The entire story happens on screen in one strand, with the exception of some background bad guy stuff, which is merely set up for where the main focus is going to end up anyway.
Too short for a stormtrooper?
Huh? Star Wars 1977 follows a ship, which passes the story to two droids, who pass the story to one kid, and that kid carries the story for the rest of the film. He finds the droids, finds the hermit, goes back home, goes to the city bar in the city town, escapes to the place that he and the crew cannot visit, only for them to be drawn in by the location that destroyed our original destination. Then they decide to save someone on that new location, leaving to return the prisoner back to her base, where they devise a strategy to destroy the location that destroys locations, ending with a ceremony for the main characters we have consistently followed for the full movie's runtime. Star Wars' plot is a single line. There may be multiple goals: stay with the old man, rescue the girl, defeat the evil, but the audience's attention is never split in two like it is in Empire Strikes Back, or three like it is in Return of the Jedi, or four as it ends in The Phantom Menace. Do you want the best of Star Wars? Keep it simple. Make it so a child can understand it. Star Wars only succeeded in the first place because a child is the kind of person that would get the most enjoyment out of it. If you were to argue that reenacting brave tales of noble knights in a schlocky space opera setting is somehow not inherently a kid-centric activity, the Clone Wars. Think about the Clone Wars, the conflict and who's against who. Clones versus robots. Now, you could summarize it as a war between a completely disposable droid army and a completely disposable clone army. Or, as the Clone Wars cartoon beautifully demonstrates, an army composed of individuals who are all equal and equally committed to fighting for their good republic, versus an army composed of inorganic, identical enemies who are forced to fight on behalf of evil people, but can be utterly and guiltlessly dismantled to all synthetic hell because they have no souls. Or in other words, good guys versus bad guys. There is no nuance. There are no gray areas.
Except in the bad episodes.
But aside from that, it's not complicated. That's not to say, however, that the Clone Wars show lacks depth. Far from true. It's surprisingly deep. It's war, but completely justified and worth taking part in, even in spite of the dramatic irony in knowing how it's all going to end. At first, that might sound shallow, except for the fact that the clones were a desperation move, and thus the undecided systems have a valid reason to consider protection from the bad guys, because the good guys might be too weak to defend them, so it requires those good guys to step up and rise up, to fight even when you know you'll likely lose. That's Star Wars. The Clone Wars proves it's very doable to have great depth within a simple story setup. Simplicity might be the opposite of complexity, but it's not the opposite of depth. Star Wars is straightforward, but is saying so much. Episode 4. You must let go of what you think you know before you can know and tap into something deeper. A kid understands that best because they're constantly learning that there's more to learn. Episode 5. You must have patience in your training before you can have meaningful success outside of it. A kid also understands that better because they don't have years of experience that leads to the greatness that they see from their mentors and heroes. And finally, Episode 6. This is how you win. Not by fighting what you hate, but by saving what you love. Which is a groundbreaking moral message that unfortunately had its original utterance occur in the worst context you could ever possibly conceive. Yikesasaurus Rex, this movie sucks! You know, I gotta be... when I first wrote this, I didn't expect to get that angry. Dang, I really hate this movie now.
That's when the fun begins.
I can ignore all the lore-breaking, trilogy-killing crap that's found within The Last Jedi, but its greatest divergence from what some may call real Star Wars was the director's commitment to subverting expectations, to breaking that traditional simplicity. Oh, you thought it was going to go this way? No. Oh, you thought it was going to go that way? No. You. The Last Jedi punishes you for expecting something simple. Or in other words, The Last Jedi punishes you for expecting Star Wars. If a kid, not to be confused with a child, cannot get the most out of it, then it's bad Star Wars. Usually, I've heard good things about Andor, but if a kid is the only kind of person to enjoy it, then yeah, that too is bad Star Wars. A children's story that can only be enjoyed by children is not a good children's story in the slightest. Just because Star Wars is for kids does not mean that it's only for kids. Just like how the simple foods are the easiest for kids to eat, but that doesn't mean adults can't receive the same kind of nutrition from them. Star Wars isn't baby food, it's chicken tendies. And it's good chicken tendies.
I got the drumstick.
We may have our preferred sauces or sides to go with it, but in the end, Star Wars is basic narrative food, and it's most inspiring and helpful to those who have fewer years on them. There's nothing wrong with liking Star Wars as an adult. It may in fact be way more beneficial than what everyone else is consuming, so long as we can distinguish between acting childish and becoming childlike again. To be soft-hearted enough to understand that there's always more to learn. Because we live in an age where everybody's got a podcast, everybody's got their grown-up opinion, where everybody's got the answer for everything, and thus, nobody is gaining anything useful because it's all just noise. A bunch of so-called fully developed people all singing different notes and never attaining harmony. You can't assume that once you reach the age of prefrontal lobe completeness that you'll either stop learning what you needed to know or that you no longer need to learn the lessons that your elders failed to teach you. We are not simply called to be fully grown trees. We are called to bear fruit, to be full of life, to be sweet, to provide your neighbors with the things they need. And if anything is keeping you from doing that, well, then you need to be reminded of the basics. Saying Star Wars is for kids is a compliment to the franchise, not an insult to the fans. This live-action, straightforward hero's journey is approachable and fun for almost any person, aka the exact opposite of anime, and that's why it's valuable. This is how Star Wars wins. Not by complicating what is basic, but by simplifying what is true. Hey, thanks for watching, and be sure to check out the rest of my videos. I just got monetization turned on, and I need to buy more Lego clones.